gee, nothing happened this weekend, Nothing.
It's been kind of dull.
Nothing.
But I do have a gripe. I am going to start with a gripe. I was switching. I'm a big Food Channel guy. And so we're switching around, and there was a segment on how to spice up watermelon. And my feeling is I don't need to put lemon juice or lime juice on watermelon or chili powder or anything. Watermelon's really good. You get it from the store, and you cut it, and you eat it.
Tap it first. You got to tap the top of it first, because usually when you hear on the inside, there's like a little bit of a crack on the inside.
Yeah.
And that's how you know if it's really ready or not.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
That's it. That's all you have to do.
I had no idea about that until my wife told me.
I've never heard of lime juice, lemon juice, or anything like that. But I can only tell you this, and I don't know if this was an Italian thing, Anthony. Maybe somebody in your family who did this. My dad loved watermelon. He'd get it during the summer, cut it up, and he would sprinkle salt on the watermelon, and it would make it sweeter. It would
Really?
Yes.
I heard that one.
Yeah, just try it once.
But would it break down the watermelon like that?
No. It sort of drew out the water of the watermelon, and it made it sweeter. Just try it once. It's weird, but it actually was good.
I'll try it once.
Yeah, then you wonder why people in my family have high blood pressure, because we're putting salt on the watermelon.
But I'm not putting chili powder.
The general part of it too, but
Yeah,
I'm not
chili
putting chili powder. I draw the line at chili powder or any other. You don't need anything. It's
watermelon's great.
And then we do poutine in a week or so, or maybe this week. We'll have to see.
Okay.
Smokes. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the veggie gravy. I'm excited.
Yeah. We have to go to South Street. They just opened one.
I said it on the July 1st free agent frenzy webcast, and Russ looked at me askew. I said, I love Canada, happy 150th, but I hate poutine.
I've never had it, so this will be a first for me. So
I won't say anything. I won't color your opinion.
I'm just gonna have it. I'm just gonna go in, enjoy all the Canadianness about it, and then I'll make a judgment call. I've had beaver tails; those are fantastic.
Yeah, we've all had that.
Coffee we've been fortunate enough to have in the press box at Wells Fargo Center. I did find out, Russ, that's definitely Tim Hortons. That was not just the cups.
Okay.
It was legit. So Timmy Ho's is definitely coffee.
All right, here we go.
That's good work by you. Good journalism.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
I'm Anthony Mangione, senior writer from Center Ice Philly Magazine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, fast and furious over the last few days. July 1st was pretty interesting. Things picked up. Big names have gone off the board. And we'll start with the most recent news that just happened less than an hour ago. The Montreal Canadiens are have to be in full panic mode, because I don't think that they thought Alex Radulov was going to go elsewhere. Mark Bergevin on the weekend sort of drew a line in the sand with Radulov, and Andrei Markov said, we want you back, but this is all we're prepared to pay, take it or leave it. Well, Radulov left it. He signs a 5-year deal with the Dallas Stars at a AAV of $6.25 million. Russ, he turns 31 in a few days. Radulov has sort of been, back and forth in the KHL. I mean, he's a quality player. What do you think of this contract?
I don't like the deal. I mean, this is a deal where you get an owner that says, I want to win another cup. I know we're building for the future, but I don't care. So he puts pressure on the GM. He gets Ken Hitchcock in there. So it's just like the good old days. And now they're just spending crazily in free agency. Is this going to guarantee the Dallas Stars anything? No. I mean, they're better. I could say they're better, and I'm sure fans will be excited because there's names. But, I'm not going to go over the edge and say this is going to, make them a cup team. Radulov, to me, I wouldn't sign him for more than 2 years at a time. He's just that guy that needs to be motivated all the time. I don't want to give him this kind of contract. And now that he's got this kind of contract, we'll see. I mean, this is a risky move. This is, like I said, they're a better team, but I'm not putting them at the top of the West yet either.
And here's the magnet for a lot of players when it comes to Texas and Florida-based teams. They're both non-state tax teams. So the money that Radulov's getting, 6.25, if he would have signed with Montreal to get that amount in his pocket, it probably would have had to be over 8 because the taxes in Quebec are ridiculous. Anthony, what did you think of this signing?
Fascinating. The minute we saw Hemsky signing for 1 year, $1 million with the Canadiens, we knew that what the likely situation was going to be with Montreal, that they were letting Radulov go, and that Dallas was the most likely. I'm fascinated by the idea of Ken Hitchcock and Alex Radulov on the same bench. This is a fascinating experiment. Again, Hitch has worked obviously with mercurial talents before. Brett Hulk obviously comes to mind, and it's worked. But I do have some concerns about the fact that it's 5 years. I will certainly go along with Russ here that that's a long-term commitment, but we also know that he had made it very public that he had no intention of going back to the KHL. So this was the best situation possible for him in terms of that. And it was fascinating earlier today because I think Alex Ivis-Kainen's had mentioned Philadelphia had been in the mix, and I was like, interesting, but not with Philly's cap situation. Certainly, they're not at the point of their development right now as a team that Hextall's going to want to necessarily deal with some of the diva-like tendencies of Alex Radulov.
Just think about this for.
That being said, I mean, in terms of the goal scoring department, sure, it's certainly been up. But again, looking at where he fits, he's a right wing / left wing. But the way Philly kind of structured themselves this offseason, you'd have to move off several players before making this happen. Philly was basically, in my mind, just floated out there, probably to get the tag higher for Dallas, or Montreal in this case. Nobody bit, and ultimately that led to, of course, Radulov finally deciding on Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Philly's got to pay $1 million from bonuses last year on this year's cap, there's no way they were going to go in heavy on another free agent. No way.
I mean, the team that was the logical bidding partner for Radulov, and apparently they dropped out sometime during the weekend, was Florida. Now, and there was a logjam, and we'll talk about Patrick Marleau in a little bit, but there was a logjam between the teams interested in Marleau and the teams interested in Radulov, and apparently Dallas was interested in both. And once Marleau signed, then the Radulov became their number one, and maybe they had to increase their offer by a year or so to get it locked in. But let's look at the Canadiens for a second, because I'm just puzzled, and it's sort of like watching a train wreck happening here, because first they lose out on Radulov. The Ales Hemsky is signed as the replacement. That's not a replacement. I mean,
he's not really signed as a replacement.
But Russ, he signed the same day.
Doesn't matter. He's just a guy.
Well, okay. I mean, he's not anywhere close to being
a basically. That's you want to say lineup wise, sure, but in reality, this is the cap world that we live in, where you make the investments that the Canadiens have made this offseason, most notably, obviously, Carey Price, which we'll get into shortly.
Right.
These are the priorities that you put in terms of how you're going to lay out your money on your lineup.
So yesterday, early in the morning, it's announced that Carey Price signs an 8-year, $84 million extension. So he's tied right now, currently, for the league lead in salary with Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves at $10.5 million AAV. The thing that's interesting about this deal, 70 of the $84 million is signing bonus. I mean, this is buyout proof, lockout proof, everything proof.
Mm-hmm. It's a great deal for him. I mean, look, they have the money. It's not a problem. And when you pay that much money, it definitely affects other players on the team because of the salary and the amount, the percentage on the cap. But everybody dumping on the Canadiens right now. A, we're still in early July. B, they have Charles Hudon who might be able to come up and score 18, 20 goals. And so, nobody's willing to even talk about any of their youngsters that could come up now that there are spots available, and they do have a few. And so, I'm not ready to dump on them yet. Now, defensively, they're better defensively. They're not better with offense in their defense, but they're better defensively and they're bigger than they used to be. So if you're telling Claude Julien he has to win every game 2-1, they just might. I'm not ready to bail on him yet.
They're not going to have a choice in the matter, Russ. That's the issue here. They don't have a choice in the matter. They have, much of their puck moving ability right now. You saw, you obviously have Markov there, Weber's there. You lost Sergachev in the Drouin trade. So that, was a guy you could have potentially counted on in this circumstance. I worry for Montreal in the fact that they could be potentially a very easy team to play against in terms of if you got a team that can clog up the neutral zone on them. I'm not necessarily sure they got the mobility on the back end to be able to deal with counter rushes, and Carey Price is going to have to earn every bit of that cap hit to keep.
Now we don't know where Noah Juleson is. It's possible they may elevate Noah Juleson,
but as of right now, the way the roster is currently constructed defensively, they have a real concern there in my mind.
Yeah, I don't think they've gotten better defensively. I mean, right now it's Weber.
No, they've gotten better defensively. I think they have.
Right now it's Weber, Petrie, Alzner, Schlemko, Jordy Ben, and probably Juleson.
That's a good defensive team.
It's a good defense, but I don't know if it's as good as what they had last year. I mean, Markov had a great year. Now, the thing is, right now, Markov was asking for 2 years, $6 million per. They've got cap room. They've got room to maneuver. If they re-sign Markov, maybe if they can get him to take 1 year, then I think, okay, they're in a good position defensively. But like Anthony said, offensively right now, I don't know what they're doing up the middle. Do you think that they're going to move Drouin to the middle? I think that would not be wise. Do they?
They're going to try it. They're going to try it. It's not.
Or does Claude Julien plug his nose and put Galchenyuk back in the middle and hope and pray?
He might do that.
I got another option you could potentially float out there. If they begin looking for centers, if they are looking for centers or surplus centers, certain team that Russ and I live near right now have a surplus in that department. So could we see Bergevin get on the horn with Ron Hextall and say, hey, what can we give you in exchange for one of those centers, and to really, obviously take off some of that cap hit? Look at a guy like Valtteri Filppula, who, again, they acquired. I think Filppula could potentially fit in there in Montreal. Laterra, if they would use him potentially, but I think the plan is to hold on. The Flyers, I think, like Laterra, and I think
they like him, I think, in that penalty killing role and that fourth line role. So,
and basically a better version of Chris Vandevelde in that fourth line role there, a better, more physical player in this case. So I'm not floating a rumor out there. I'm just saying that if the Flyers wanted to relieve and kind of set things up a little differently with the surplus players that they have, Montreal potentially is a place where that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, there are teams with excess centers, and I mean, and like we both all said, is the summer is not over with, but as of right now, I don't know the direction that the Canadians are going. And now we mentioned before we hit the record button here that there is a possibility. There are two names out there, the venerable Jaromir Jagr and Ilya Kovalchuk, who, by the way, was supposedly offered a ton of, we're going to back up the Brinks truck in St. Petersburg for him. Well, he hasn't signed that deal with SKA. So if that's the case,
because he knows it's there, that's why.
Right, he knows it's there. He can go back to it. It's a fallback position. But if now Montreal is desperate, and now that they've lost Radulov, now if they will offer him a 2 or 3 year deal, then you might see Kovalchuk in Montreal.
But here's the thing. I still don't think people understand Marc Bergevin from a cap perspective. He was going to pay Carey Price, right? He's the franchise. He doesn't give out big contracts. He just doesn't. And so if Kovalchuk is expecting he probably looks at the Radulov deal and is expecting something similar. There's no way Montreal's giving him something similar.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Rangers made arguably the biggest splash. I mean, Shattenkirk was the prize in free agency. And I've heard mixed things about this, Russ. I mean, it's like they got Shattenkirk for 4 years. They have to be complimented for that. They didn't give him 5, they didn't give him 6, but they gave him almost $7 million per.
He was offered 7 for 7 by a couple teams. So
yeah, I don't know. I heard mixed things about I heard that the Devils were in, but they only offered maybe a year or maybe 2 years more. They went 6, but not 7. So. Overall, what do you think of the signing?
Well, here's the thing. Again, I think people started to get overly critical about him just before free agency opened. Well, let's talk about everything he can't do instead of talking about what he can do. And that's why the day before free agency, I brought it up and I said, hey, if the Rangers sign him, he's going to play with Ryan McDonough. I'm not really worried about what he does so much in his own end if he's paired with Ryan McDonough. Now I'm worried about, hey, what could he do on the power play? He's great on the power play. He scores double-digit goals every year. He could break the 50-point barrier with the right guys. He's a terrific puck mover, and he is not horrible defensively. Remember, this guy's been an all-star too, and everybody's like, well, he doesn't get picked for the U.S. team. There's a lot of politics involved in that, but you know what? He played for BU. He had a lot of responsibility there. Hitch put a lot of pressure on him in St. Louis. It's not like all of a sudden he's going to walk into MSG and go aghast because there's some spotlight on him. He's had spotlight on him his whole career. He's a pretty highfalutin U.S. player who everybody's known about since he's really played at Old Avon Farms. So I'm not worried about him. I think he'll be fine. I think if anybody's looking for a Keith Yandel 2.0, he's better than Keith Yandel. He was always better in his own end than Yandel. I'm not saying he's terrific in his own end, but Yandel was always like a train wreck at times in his own end.
Now, the one thing I noticed about looking at the Rangers, Anthony, and looking at their cap situation, they have Lundqvist and they have the defenseman, Stahl and now Shattenkirk locked up for 4 years, but everybody else, it's 2 years, 1 year. They don't have a lot of allocated money down the line. So that's good in terms of fiscal organization for the Rangers.
Yeah, there's a certainly financial flexibility that they have after the next 2 seasons. Again, as Russ brought up, I think if Shattenkirk is paired with McDonough, that mitigates, I think, some of his defensive shortcomings, because at the very least, you have a guy like McDonough behind you, you're going to have the encouragement to go on the play and do the things that you do best. And Shattenkirk is an excellent offensive defenseman. If McDonough goes down, then I think those defensive inadequacies begin to show up a lot more. Sure. And that's the one thing you have to be concerned with the amount of money that they allocate. That being said, the contract, which everybody thought was going to be over $7 million, wasn't that. And in that respect, I think it was a good investment for New York. He's as good a puck mover as there is, in the NHL, in terms of getting the puck on that, especially a power play weapon. They absolutely need a guy who can bomb it from the point. He can absolutely do that. I think also his performance with the Capitals, I think, kind of shaded how people looked at him as well, especially in the postseason. He had some rough games in the playoffs, so everybody's like, do you really want to invest? Well, if you want to look at it and say, hey, maybe that postseason performance shaved a little bit of what his offer was going into free agency, then that's certainly a possibility. That being said, New York did very well, I think, in bringing him in. And again, if he's paired with McDonough, it's going to be good. And again, as you said, financial flexibility after the next 2 seasons. New York will be able to do some things afterwards to restructure as they go forward. So ultimately, I think it's a good situation.
And he was a plus player in Washington in the regular season. And during the playoffs, I think he had like 7 points in 13 games, playing Trotz's system, which at times is unbearably defensive. And he did play it. So he wasn't necessarily playing to his strength either.
No, but I think the criticism of Shattenkirk in the playoffs was the giveaways. I know in the Toronto series he made a few glaring ones. Now, speaking of the Capitals, and they were busy this weekend, and okay, first they lock up Dmitry Orlov. There were some hints of him potentially going back to Russia. I think that both him and Kuznetsov used that as bargaining chips. Orlov gets $5.1 million for 6 years. I think that's pretty much par for the course for an offensive defenseman. They may have paid a little more because they bought unrestricted years, but the interesting maneuver was yesterday when Kuznetsov was extended for 8 years at almost $8 million, and then a few moments later they flipped Marcus Johansson to the New Jersey Devils for a couple draft picks. Russ, McClellan is taking a little heat for this. I don't think these are bad moves.
No, everybody's sort of like they're back into the mode of let's bash the Capitals, right? And so who would let Kuznetsov walk as a GM in this league? Nobody. Because even if he didn't have a great year last year, he showed you what he can do. And if he keeps the consistency going, he's a heck of a player. He could be a top 10 player in the league because he has that kind of talent. Whether he does that or not, who knows? But I'm just saying you can't let him walk. Johansson was on the outs for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So we knew he wasn't going to be signed long-term, and you knew he was going to be gone. Now, did they get a ton for him? No. But here's the thing. I've even seen people writing stuff and saying stuff like, well, Washington's not even that deep. Washington's really deep as far as kids go. They got Madison Bowie, who can come up and play defense. They got Riley Barber, who can come up. They have Jakob Verana, who can come up. And they have a few other players. Jonas Siegenthaler's not that far away. Like, they are loaded. For people who just are tied up into these names and contracts, they are loaded with prospects. So in the next couple of years, when they start seeding these kids in, they'll be fine. So that's why I'm not worried about the Capitals.
Anthony, I mean, I think the criticism with Washington, I mean, first of all, you look at their defense now as opposed to what it was a couple months ago. Schmidt's gone. Shattenkirk's gone. Alsner's gone. You know, they still have Niskanen, Orpik, Orlov, and Carlson. Carlson's going to have to be signed next year. But some of the things that they did, I mean, if you look at their cap situation, they have about $8 million in cap space, and the only RFA they really have to sign is Burakovsky. So they're not in terrible shape, and they pretty much kept most of the forwards that were difference makers last year. So I don't think they're in a bad state right now.
I don't think so either. It's just, I think when everybody looks at the subtractions that they've had this offseason from the current roster, which was one of the best in the National Hockey League, you're going to get this reaction out of people that the Caps window is shut, that they're done. Now, Russ put it best. I mean, in terms of they've got guys in the system. Now, Bowie, I've had word that he still needs probably a little bit more time before he's ready to come up from Hershey. He's still raw on some aspects, and I don't know if they're necessarily comfortable yet bringing him up. That being said, they may have to anyway because of the questions that they've had. And he's
physical, so no matter what, they gain that aspect.
And they need that, certainly in their back line. You add it to the mix, and again, we have to give also Jersey Devils GM Ray Shero a ton of credit for taking advantage of this situation and adding a 60-point getter for 2 draft picks that aren't New Jersey Devil draft picks. They were acquired from other deals as well. So it's a smart move on Shero's part, and he adds a top 6 forward for almost what seems like pennies on the dollar, which again makes McClellan look bad in this circumstance. But in reality, when you look at the situation, they wanted Oshie. They felt that Oshie was an important player, so you knew that in reality that's the trade-off. They basically decided on Oshie over Johansson. The other thing we have to take into the mix here as well that people also may be looking at with the Caps is that that Trotz is down to the last year of his deal, and that there is some concern here that the window is closing if Trotz is going to be leaving, and they have not allowed Todd Reardon to really interview elsewhere. So you know the intention could be that we could potentially see that happening in the in the near future, that Reardon may be taking over if they don't win it this year.
Yeah, I don't think, you know what's funny? And I don't think losing Trotz closes the window for them. Yeah. Trotz has never done much in the playoffs. I mean, we have to be realistic about that. We all like him. He's a great guy. He's never advanced.
We know why he was brought in. We know why he was to instill a defensive responsibility on the Capitals. Yes. For the most part, that did happen. They were a much better defensive team under him and have been. Mm-hmm. But, again, you still have him hitting that second-round ceiling, and they just can't bust past it.
Well, I saw Bowie 2 years ago play for Hershey in the Calder Cup conference final, and I thought he was an NHL defenseman at that point. So there may still be a few rough edges, but I think he can learn to sort of hone those in the NHL. And I saw Verana too, and I think he was pretty close as well.
Verana got bounced up and down a lot last year. I think he could be more consistent, and I think he'll do that this year. Like I said, I'm not worried about him. Even goaltending wise, they have Samsonov. Like if you go and look at this team's farm system, they are loaded, man.
Yeah, and what they're going to do is like what they did today. They added Devontae Smith-Pelly, who's an NHL player. He can be a fourth-line guy for you. They re-signed Brett Connolly. They're going to add pieces, and the attraction of somebody like Ovechkin and Backstrom and all those guys, that's a magnet for other players. So veteran players might be willing to take a one-year deal for less money, to go to Washington, just like they will go to, places like Dallas or San Jose or Florida because of taxes or whatever, or weather. Now, we'll get into this, although Eck is going to jump on any second, but we'll start with this and then probably finish up after he jumps off. the Maple Leafs make a couple signings on Saturday, veteran signings. Ron Hainsey to a 2-year deal. Dominic Moore to a 1-year deal. Brian Boyle went out to sign with New Jersey. Not a big thing, but Dominic Moore is a capable fourth-line center. Ron Hainsey is a capable bottom-pairing defenseman. Where I was slightly critical is the fact that if Ron Hainsey is a top 4 on this team, then they're in trouble because he's not a top 4 defenseman. If he's replacing Matt Hunwick, that's all fine and good. Sunday, you were waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it finally did because Patrick Marleau was out there. He hadn't signed when Thornton signed in San Jose, so everybody, I think the feeling out there was that Marleau was going to sign someplace else because if he was going to go back to San Jose, he probably would have been in concert with Thornton. And he signs a 3-year, $18.75 million deal with the Maple Leafs. I was a little stunned. Russ, what did you think of the deal?
I think it's a year too long, but I think if you get 2 really good years out of them, the Leafs will deal with the last year. I think they're looking at that. I think they are certainly looking at Zach Hyman's replacement. There's no way you brought in Patrick Marleau and you're going to keep Zach Hyman on the top line. I said it the other day, and I'm sticking with that, Mike. I mean, he's a top line guy for them now. They want Matthews to learn from him. He's a very gifted scorer. There's no reason to not do that. So I think they got better. He's got to be good for 2 years, though. If he dies after 1 year, and then this deal will face tremendous scrutiny. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I was joking on Twitter that after year 2, they're going to send him on vacation with Marian Hossa so he can catch the skin rash. But I'm just joking. But yeah, I think it. I mean, the deal was front loaded. He got $8 million this year. I think it was 6.5
exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's structured for a 2-year window, and if he plays the 3rd year, great. But I do think it changes things around. I think Marleau will play with Matthews. But if they hadn't signed Marleau,
there's progress. See, so much progress this weekend for you, Mike. I'm proud of you.
If they hadn't signed Marleau, Hyman would have stayed with Matthews. I'm telling you right now.
Did.
All right. But you can't assume anything until it actually. You have to wait till it actually happens.
That's what we do. We hypothesize and assume.
Remember the Bad News Bears? Never assume. You make an ass out of you and me. Okay, Anthony. I think I agree with Russ that it's a year too long, but I think that was the price that they had to pay to sign him. Are you surprised Marleau left San Jose?
I was after when it was known if Thornton was going to sign. My expectation was that Marleau was probably going to stay, but we're probably it's dangerous to automatically assume guys are package deals in free agency. And the fact of the matter is that once we saw the numbers that Toronto was putting out for him, San Jose wasn't going to lay that kind of money out for Marleau. As much loyalty as they may have to the guy, that would have been there's no way, no how they would have done that contract with him. So he has to make the big move going across. I really do. More and more I look at it again. The only thing I'm concerned about is everybody's like, oh, he hasn't been hurt in 8 seasons. He's an Ironman. I was like, yeah, well, the law of averages.
Yes,
start to happen. As he's like, he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on him. I'm like, he's played a lot of hard minutes for the San Jose Sharks. But But that being said, he's been very fortunate. He's in great physical shape. I do feel that for a 37-year-old forward, though, that a 3-year deal was a bit too far, a bridge too far for me with regards to signing him to the deal that they did at the cap hit that they did.
Yeah,
I do. Again, they look at him as much as a mentor or a guy like obviously like Matthews and many of the other, but Matthews is really the target here. And also, there's injuries that could swing him back to center. There's easily put Marleau in the middle, say if Matthews gets hurt. And, I don't want to say not necessarily skip the beat, but again, he's a consistent 30-goal scorer, rock solid player. As long as he remains healthy, he's unquestionably an upgrade for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
No, I believe that he's going to be kept on the wing for them, and this is the thing.
Yeah, he will be.
Yeah, this is move one in a 2-pronged move because it does not make sense to sign Marleau and then be overloaded at wing and not have that top 4 defenseman that you need. And hey, Ak, how's it going? And as X said on Saturday, one of the things that you'd be looking at is if the Leafs sign Marleau, they're going to probably have to flip a guy like JVR. Now, JVR is only signed for 1 more year, and now that Marleau is signed for 2 years after this year at $6.25 million, there is no room to sign JVR to a long-term extension. So I think what you're going to see in the next week is JVR flipped for a top 4 defenseman somewhere.
Yeah, I'd say, hey, Anthony, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
Good, man. Yeah, I am. I agree. Actually, I was told flat out that they wouldn't trade, they wouldn't sign Marleau until they knew they could trade JVR. So whether or not, they have a couple options now or, they're pulling back on that, that's still to be determined, right? But I think this is a good sign that they know they can trade. And I don't think it's surprising that they can trade JVR. I mean, JVR is a talented guy.
Right. Well, I think what Toronto was waiting for, Ak, and I think that they were smart, is there were 3 20-goal scorers in free agency this year. One of them was Verbata. He signed with Florida. One of them was Marleau, and there was one other, and I can't remember the other one. Right, Radulov scored 19 goals last year. But once those guys went off the board, there's no real consistent scoring in this free agent class.
You mentioned Florida. Florida did exactly – this is where I never want to say somebody is a savior, even a Dale Talon, because Dale Talon went in, he made his moves, but he could only shop in this year's free agent market, which isn't a great market. And so he was going against a lot of teams, and now when the dust is settled, Florida's no better than they were last year. They may be worse. And
they went hard for Radulov.
But that's what I mean, but they lost out.
They started to feel like, and let's repeat what Mike just said for a second, guys. Mm-hmm. Radulov scored 19 goals last year. That is something that is worth noting again. That as much as he just signed 5 years, $6.25 million, to play for a team where he's not going to be the number 1 guy. He was the best scorer on Dallas. I mean, on Montreal. On Dallas, he's not the best.
Well, one thing, Ak, and you're right. He's only scored 19 goals, but you're talking about a team that he played with Philip Deneau for most of the year.
Yeah, but there's a give and take on that, right? Because on one hand, he's playing every first power play. He's playing every possible moment. Yes, he's playing with less players, but there's more puck for him to have. So where you go now, you're Sagan. You're in the Sagan world, right? So you're in a totally different world in Dallas. There's a lot, Ben, Sagan. You're gonna have a lot.
I think he'll still be on the first power play. They can move Spezza to the second one, and he could play the wing on the first power play. I mean,
they do that because Spezza was so good for them last year.
I know.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll move Spezza out of that power play. I'll be honest.
I think what we've seen in this free agency period in general, more than ever before, is a group of owners pushing GMs. I think you're
no question about that.
There seems to be some moves that are the Dallas one, this Radulov one. There's no question that I think I'm not going to say that the Marleau move isn't that, but the Marleau move is definitely a little bit of a departure from where Toronto was going, right?
Well, the Marleau move was the reality that there was, and we've talked about this for a little while. There was a 2-year window. They realized that you've got that 2-year window right now with Marner and Matthews on their entry levels, where you could not spend willy-nilly, but you could spend and add veteran guys and take a concerted run for championship, and then probably have to reset in a couple years when you pay Matthews and Marner and maybe Nylander the big money. So I think that was the reason why they went after Marleau, and that's why I think the corresponding move is to add the top 4 defensemen, whether it be Tanev or they make a deal for Vatanen or whatever. But that is the only way that Marleau makes sense is if they make the next move. If they stay right now and Ron Hainsey's on their second defensive pairing, then I don't know what the heck they're doing.
Listen, I mean, the reality is in this market, though, Mike, not everybody can make the moves that they have planned out. That's what I was talking about with Florida. Yeah. That's what I'm going to say even with the next go-round for the Leafs. It's just prices are ridiculous, and the teams sort of had to say what was – they had to act on what was most important to them. And I think teams did that. But as far as those secondary things and after that, that's hard.
Yeah, but the top 4, a top 4D is not a secondary thing. I think
it's a hard thing to fill, though. That's what it is.
It is a hard thing to fill, but I think the main reason. I mean, there were there were things with Marlowe in terms of leadership, in terms of experience, that they wanted to have an influence on the young guys. But I really think that the main motivation with Marlowe is the fact that Babcock likes him, he trusts him, he's consistent. And if you bring him in, then JVR becomes not disposable, but you can move him without significantly affecting your offense. And that's why I think one has to do with the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of interesting things about the Marlowe move. Like there's a lot of interesting things about it. One is I'm happy for Toronto fans that the team's going for it. You know, the team's actually going to try to win now. They're not trying to just, get the best draft pick they can get. They're going for it, and that's good. And the other thing about that, though, that's really interesting is Patrick Marlowe hated negative press in San Jose. Like there were times when, we had a writer in there who got kicked out of the press box for a game because he wrote something about Marlowe, which was completely within the norms of, or even mellow as to what would be said in Philadelphia to somebody. He just basically asked them, he said, "You skated today." I remember the situation was it was a playoff game. Marlowe was day-to-day. Marlowe took the morning skate. And he went up to me and said, "So you look pretty good in the morning skate. Does that mean you're going to play today?" And Marlowe got all pissed off. And,
all I can say for Patrick,
Gerard and Marlowe's wife too, who's another really big character and a good person. But like I said, I know people who know her very well, who are on the youth hockey team with them, and I know the whole situation. Marlowe's wife read Hockey Buzz. I used to hear things about it, so it was one of these things. Like they really just Marlowe's going to a totally different situation than he's ever been in before.
And Mike Babcock's edict about being somebody who protects his players will be it put to the forefront when it comes to Patrick Marlowe. But all I can do is suggest to Patrick, buy satellite radio for your car and watch different cable stations other than GSN Sportsnet, because you're going to get criticized. Even if you play good for 80 games, those 2 games that you play badly, you're going to get criticized. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
Well, Marlowe's history in the playoffs too is not the greatest. So he's not a bad player.
Pretty good though. Like when you look at it, it's
got good numbers. It's really, we did this before, Russ. Remember we talked about this within this debate, but he's got good numbers. But I know as a person who Sharks are one of the teams I like to follow in the West. I remember I had that feeling of that I've been disappointed by Marlowe in the playoffs. Like there have been moments when he didn't come up with a big goal or didn't come up with a big player. His numbers overall are fine, and they're average to what he's been in the regular season. But he hasn't been one of those guys who's really stepped up. I saw Justin Williams, by the way, on the beach like 5 minutes ago, which is really funny. Very happy guy today. Has his place down here in Ventnor, and he's doing pretty well. So it's funny to see a guy. What does a guy do like right after he signs for multi-millions of dollars? He sits on the beach and has a beer with his buddy. That's what he's doing. So it's pretty hilarious. It's pretty funny. Anthony, what are your thoughts on the Flyers move? I just was curious about if you thought they should have been more aggressive.
I think where they're at right now, I think I was okay with what they did. Certainly, I originally thought that Jonathan Bernier might have been the guy they were looking at with the prior history he had with Hextall in Los Angeles and with the goalie coaches. But Elliott, I think, is probably the best in terms of UFAs. Is probably the best guy they were going to have that would fit what they were going to do if they weren't going to make a trade for a goaltender in this case. Free agent wise, again, there's getting Wheel back. I think fit well, and certainly after the trade of Braden Shen, there was a screaming need on the left wing. Wheel now will have that opportunity to potentially, I don't know if he's not by himself. He's not going to be able to, keep up that scoring clip. But again, in terms of we all know Braden's numbers are skewed towards the power play versus even strength. So overall, I'm okay with what they did. They're still, in my mind, about a year away before they can really start to look at what they might do with UFAs. We got to see where they're at as a team.
I'll tell you the most under-talked about thing for the Flyers is Shen played in the middle on the power play. Who's playing there now? Like, we all want to kill Braden Shen for the power play goals he got, but now you have to replace those power play goals. Who's going to do it?
And that's a big question here in this case. And again, we're going to need to see if Nolan Patrick figures into this going into the season. Would he end up being the replacement? But again, we have to see physically where he's at. 4 to 6 weeks, according to Ron Hextall, with regards to his recovery from the abdominal surgery. If he's what they think he can be, he could potentially be that guy. And again, as a right shot, gives them a different look in that circumstance. So if he can play to the level that everybody thinks he's capable of in his first year, he could be that guy. If not, then things get a little bit more interesting on that second power play center unit. That's going to be very interesting to see. But that's a good point, Russ.
Did you guys share the story at all last week of Russ Cohen and Kevin Allen in the first pick in the draft that I heard from Kevin? Did I share it all?
We talked about it when Kevin was on the show.
We did.
Okay, I wasn't sure. It was pretty funny.
It was great.
You know, Russ actually convinced Kevin to change his mind. If you guys didn't hear it.
That's pretty good.
Russ's powers of persuasion were at its utmost.
I think that's a huge amount of respect, Russ. I mean, that's all I can say.
No, I took it that way too. I did.
You know, and not to say you let him down, but I just think that it wasn't good.
Okay.
No, obviously. No, but you know what? At the end of the day, I was talking to Kevin yesterday. He was laughing about it. And he said, he's really. I thought Nolan Patrick. He is a flyer, like in his mind, like from what he's seen, how he's seen him play. You know, he's like that Keith Primo type player. He's got that. You know, he's got the Patrick name. Like he just feels like a flyer. You know, as opposed to Nico, who feels more like a devil probably. So it's more along. So it didn't make sense, but I thought it was pretty hilarious that.
No, it was good. It was
that he changed his mind on that. From all I've heard, Anthony, it does sound like that they kind of expect Nolan Patrick to play this year. It really and that is kind of out there for Hextall, I think, to a degree, because Hextall has been so conservative in general. So if there is any chance at all, if for some reason he comes in and doesn't look well from the injury, Hextall won't hesitate, I don't think, to send him back. But I think that the idea is that, and it's another case though, because like I was talking about before, where you have owners kind of forcing general managers to do things. You also have a situation, I think, where you have some general managers without strong ownerships who are doing odd things. And I think that, so you have Hextall, for example, in Philly. No one knows who would fire Ron Hextall. Like, no one has any idea. You, Joe? I don't know who would really fire Ron Hextall.
We know that there's a guy. We've seen him maybe twice this hockey season.
There's a guy.
But Ron
there's a guy,
really,
too, Russ. I mean, there's a guy, but...
I know. I agree. Nobody knows.
I mean, it used to be, okay, we looked at Peter Luco, and Peter Luco was the guy who would make the moves with Paul Holmgren or whatever. So you knew that Holmgren was sort of accountable. Would Holmgren fire Hextall? I get the sense that they're more kind of on par with each other.
Give a recommendation, but I don't think you can do it.
And like that, you have a situation going on in Colorado where you have Sakic, who really, there's not a strong ownership there either, and no one knows who's accountable there. So what Sakic is doing with Duchesne, which is really getting to the edge of bizarre, because I've been talking to people now who, good sources in Columbus and Nashville. So I haven't really talked to many people in Boston. I kind of don't know if the Boston offers how real it is, or if it's something that they're just Sakic's kind of keeping alive for the sake of having a third team involved. But
well, I mean, from what Ty Anderson said, Boston's still not on board with offering Brandon Carlo, and if they're not on board with offering Brandon Carlo, they're not getting Matt Duchesne, because I have a feeling that's what they're. Colorado native. He's 21 years old, and he's a big, good young defenseman.
Look, Travis Hamonic was not to Joe Sakic's liking, because he wanted a guy still on their ELC or with RFA status. He wanted him to be 25 or under and a right-handed shot and a top pairing guy. So as an example, if the Rangers wanted to trade for Matt Duchesne, they would lose Brady Shea. Like there's nobody else they could give up on their team that Joe Sakic would accept. So when you start limiting the terms to that, it tells me that Duchesne's not going anywhere.
Well, there were some people, and I know that you're really tied in with Nashville Act. There were some people who thought when they got Emelin from Vegas.
And I was one of those people, because that made sense, right? That was and when people had talked about them getting Alzner, which I knew they weren't in an Alzner, but when I think the people made the natural assumption that it's interesting, because there's so few people that are really connected to Nashville, and I'm not saying I'm super connected to Nashville, but I'm more connected than most Canadian people out there. So it's like there's a lot. And maybe more are now because they just spent time there. But I don't get the sense Hoyle doesn't open up to too many people. And the one thing that Nashville's really interesting about Nashville is they have money. Like for the first time in their lives, they got a huge playoff game. Like just something that just completely every one of those games is like $2.5 million. So think about that. What that changes things as far as what you're doing. Their cap is actually lower based on the players they've lost, even though they've signed Bonino and Hartnell. Their cap's still lower because they lost James Neal, right? So. Yeah. And the other guy they lost. So they have money to spend. So the Duchesne money issue is not a big deal. I thought for sure when they went and got Emelin, who I'm not a huge fan of Emelin, and didn't seem like a Poyle type defenseman, that maybe they were going to flip Emelin, or they were going to use that to move somebody else off the defense,
like Ellis or Ekholm.
Ekholm was the guy they wanted, right? So, but then I was told pretty quickly that no, that Emelin's not involved in this at all.
Maybe Weber likes playing with Emelin?
That could be, but then you also have the idea of, now I heard that how Nashville was staying in this thing was by offering Girard and
Samuel Girard, yeah.
Carrier. So Carrier and Girard, two really good defensive prospects, right?
Yeah, but Girard's still years away, and that's probably where Sakic would balk at it.
But what about Carrier? Is he close?
He's not close either. Like, I think both of those guys we're still talking a couple of years away, two or more. And
if we're talking prospect when it comes to Nashville to Colorado, you're probably talking Fabro. So that's
right.
I mean,
well, those are the two players though that have been mentioned.
Fabro's closer.
Nashville seems to think that. I mean, at least the people I was talking to in Nashville seem to think that Girard and Carrier are closer to that. I don't know. Maybe
that might be.
If you're going to make Girard a power play guy and just throw him on the third pair to start, then he is closer. But Fabro all around is closer.
That might be spin coming out of Nashville to see how how if they can pull the wool over.
Nobody was higher in the draft than me on Girard, but I'm just saying you got to give him a little time.
Right, and I think Smith is another guy that they were looking at as a forward who would go in out. He's so, but I honestly think that Nashville could take would like to have Duchesne, but is okay if not they don't get Duchesne. Where I think that Columbus really wants Duchesne, and I think they need. I mean, the Columbus mandate when I was talking to them this time last year, was we don't have enough skilled players flat out. Like we just don't have. We have good players. We have hardworking players. Everybody knows this as the hardworking Columbus Blue Jackets. We work out. We'll check you, forecheck you. But who's the real skilled players? And Sam Gagne went on there and looked like an incredibly skilled player compared to the rest of the Blue Jackets. And he is a skilled player. But then of course they go out and they get a very good skilled player. And their top guy now, Panarin. They grab Panarin. That's a hugely skilled player. And now they look at Duchesne and they're saying, okay, with Duchesne, and then now you're adding a ton of skill with Duchesne and Panarin. I mean, that's
and Dubois probably comes in next year as well.
He's not involved in this trade at all. Like there have been rumors about Dubois being. There's no way Dubois is involved in this trade.
There are some more signings too. Mike Riley signed a 2-year deal for Minnesota. Like he could be a heck of a defenseman in a year or two. So
that's not bad at all.
That's good. Grigorenko still has 2 offers out there from NHL teams. I'm guessing Montreal is one of them. I would think Montreal would be one of them.
That's possible. But
sorry, just someone just entered the door behind me. Sorry.
But he also apparently got an offer from CSKA Moscow, and I think TSN reported that he had signed it, but then reports out of Russia came out that he didn't sign it, so it's still being decided.
One other thing I want to throw about the Joe Thornton trade, the Joe Thornton signing that I heard about was, we were all wondering why it was being delayed, and I talked to somebody, it was because of the fact that Thornton was willing to take less money if Marleau came back.
Makes sense.
Well, so holding off on the exact number. He said, I'll play there for 6 with Marleau. I'll play there with 8 without him. That's kind of how it played out.
I wish I had my Karnak hat that I could put on right now because
we all do, Mike.
Yes, but San Jose was very interesting in their maneuvers this weekend. They extend Vlasic, which I think they way over. I like Vlasic as a defenseman, but how Vlasic makes $500,000 more than Cam Fowler when he's 5 years older, I do not understand. But they signed Vlasic to an 8-year extension. They signed Martin Jones, I think it was to a 6-year extension, making a little under $6 million. Those deals don't kick in till next year.
Yeah.
And Thornton got the bulk of the money that was available this year. You got $8 million.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, how many rumors are we going to hear before the deadline and next July about Joe Thornton joining his buddy Patrick Marleau in Toronto and Tyler Bozak?
$1 million cap hit at any point. That's the thing about that. It's like who can? I mean, Toronto, I guess, will be able to perhaps, but it's like that's still even if you take it on with just a month to go in the season, that's. And I also don't think Joe Thornton. I don't see Thornton as. Well, I'm just saying. I would want to play in Toronto at all. I'm really surprised at Marleau, to be honest. So maybe I could be wrong. Maybe Marleau goes there. And the only reason that they're both possibly even thinking about it is because of the coach. That guy is definitely somebody that they love and they admire.
Toronto pitched Thornton very hard before he signed with San Jose.
Yeah.
Now, but I'm saying right now, the road back to San Jose might not be there next July because those contracts kick in on top of Brent Burns. So, I mean, there may not be that money there. The Leafs, Tyler Bozak is a UFA. He leaves. They could sign Thornton for a year.
Oh, yeah. No, next year? Yeah.
I'm not saying trade because the Leafs can't fit $8 million under the cap, but I'm saying next year in free agency, you could see Thornton go and play with and sign with the Leafs.
Well, I think that'll be the place where he's favored to go right off the bat because of the fact that now it depends, of course, how things go with Marleau in Toronto because we could if Toronto with Marleau is a big success, then all is right with the world. If for some reason something goes wrong, which is not, I'm not saying that's ever possible in Toronto, but it's possible that that something goes wrong with Marleau and it doesn't play out properly. Then who knows? I mean, but
that's fair.
I really want to see how that plays out here. Now, let's talk about Montreal for a second. You guys probably did already, right?
We did, but you can give your thoughts. Yeah.
I'll give you my quick thoughts on this because when I heard the Radulov thing, like I said, that's again, this is definitely an owner pushing a general manager. This is no way. This is just not a Jim Nill signing to me. Like that, there's nothing about this.
No, I agree.
He is.
I heard at the draft he was being pushed, so I knew it.
Yeah. So he's being pushed. This really puts Montreal up against it because Montreal. Now they signed Price yesterday, which was a good move PR-wise, because if they hadn't signed Price before they lost Radulov, people would be panicking. I'd be like, Price isn't going to come back because we lost Radulov. You could hear that happening. So the signing of Price was huge. But now I hear Galchenyuk for Anisimov being thrown around again. And that this is what the Galchenyuk thing is so crazy because when I talk to some people in Montreal, they're like, "Oh, we like him." No, we're not. He's not. And then there are other people. Oh, he can't do it. He's terrible. Like I'll actually hear people in Montreal who say he's way overrated. He can't play defense at all. He doesn't know how to play a system. He's not smart up. I mean, just all kinds of things.
If they do if Chicago does Anisimov for Galchenyuk, then that Stan Bowman was a highwayman because that's highway robbery. Then he has a .357 Magnum in his pocket. Because that's a joke. I mean,
let's be fair. Anisimov will score 20, 25 goals anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't. Galchenyuk, I mean, he's like half a season away from being a total bust in Montreal right now.
But Galchenyuk will play the wing in Chicago, and he'll probably play the wing with Patrick Kane.
Right.
And he'll probably score 30 to 35 goals in Chicago.
Yep. Possibly, yeah. I mean, if he did, he doesn't. I mean, the problem with him, if you're replacing Hossa with Galchenyuk, which is like kind of the concept, right?
No, Saad's replacing him.
Yeah,
okay, I guess Saad's replacing Hossa more. Yeah,
he's going to take the Panarin role if they do.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's just I think Montreal is going to have to be incredibly aggressive, and from all I've heard, that they're not going to stop here, and there are some players out there, but not really many players you can sign.
Well, we mentioned Cole.
There's nobody to be aggressive left with unless they're making a trade. To me, stick with Drouin and Galchenyuk. Let them play together. Don't make any trades until you see what they can do together because you might have magic there, and why would you even risk trading that if you do?
But I think my theory here is that if Duchesne doesn't get done today or within the next,
it's not getting done.
And I mean, here's the thing. I talked to somebody out there.
Joe Sakic he's purchasing sparklers. I mean, Joe's a sparkler kind of guy.
Sakic, Sakic is really frustrating because Columbus and Nashville both think that they've given Sakic exactly what he wants, and they basically have said to him, "It's like it's like you're trying to sell me your car. I've come to you you said $1,000. I say here's $1,000, and they say, and then you say, well, I'm not so sure. They say, okay, what do you want then? You don't want $1,000? He's like, no, I want $1,000. It's like, okay, are you going to sell me the car? He's like, I'll see. Do you want something besides $1,000? No. And this is what's happening. So they're in this weird spot where Sakic is not giving them any indication as to what else he wants, and they've sort of matched his thing. So, I think, again, if there was an owner there, this would be done because the owner would say, listen, and Duchesne would have somewhere else to go because people don't realize that, star players will go to owners in situations like this. That's what that would be Duchesne's move right now. Would be like, listen, just friggin' trade me already. I'm tired of this. It's like no disrespect, but I've been a good soldier and all that stuff.
I think he's
if it doesn't get done though. Does Montreal get back in on Duchesne? Because, and I think I could see that playing out. And now Montreal doesn't have the defenseman that they want.
Right.
But
that's why they won't.
Well, yeah. I mean,
unless they're willing to trade
right?
Unless they're willing to trade Noah Juleson, and like I said, Montreal apparently is allergic to every 20-something-year-old defenseman.
Yeah, they can't. I'll be honest. Montreal can't afford to make that deal. If they make that deal in 2 or 3 years, they will be in significant trouble defensively, and they won't be able to come out of it in free agency. That's
Montreal
in the future.
Devils. Like Montreal is becoming the New Jersey Devils. And that's a city that will not be okay with.
No, they're still better than the Devils.
With a scoring by, but I mean the Devils. Montreal. This is the flying Frenchman city. This is the place where Radulov is exciting because that's where you want there. This is where Lafleur flew. They don't.
Yeah, that's the 70s. They haven't won.
Be something exciting for them, and they
haven't even been to a Stanley Cup since 1993. I mean, all of that's gone. It means nothing.
It is, but not the fan base, because every time they bring player in like this. And I think their next move is Yakupov. I really do. I think that's where they've got to go, which is worth a chance, right? I mean, for Montreal, Yakupov. And the Flyers, I've also heard this, Anthony, with the Flyers and Yakupov. You heard anything about that?
Along those lines, and now Yakupov. I haven't heard anything along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it doesn't seem like a Hextall move, but it's been out there.
Because I look at the lineup and I say the Philly's going down right. He's a right wing.
Yeah.
So if you look at the lineup going down on the right side, it doesn't fit. You can swing to the left, maybe. But even now, I don't see the fit.
If he comes in, Lindblom can't play, and they're not doing that.
They want to keep the door open to Oscar Lindblom to be able to open the roster spot. He had such a great year, obviously, in the SHL. I mean, could he get optioned down to the fans?
Yeah, but it's his spot to lose.
But in reality, yeah, between Wheel and him, that's now the left side. And of course, Terra, who's likely going to be on the left side unless they make another trade.
Yeah,
likely be the other left one. So yeah, they're pretty well on the wing at this point now. Are pretty well set.
Well, and just because we're coming up on 2:00 and we can't go too long here.
Yeah.
The one other team that I think reflected the ownership pushing the buttons of the GM to make moves that I don't think were particularly good was the Vancouver Canucks. Now, Gagne was not a bad move, but Del Zotto for what they paid him, and Anders Nielsen making $2.5 million to be Jakob Markstrom's caddy. I just think it's insane.
He may or may not be. I think that's another platoon. That could be another platoon situation there. Mike. I'm not necessarily sure about that. If it happens to be that way, then I mean, you look at Philadelphia. It's kind of the same thing. It's 2.75 for Elliott and 2.5 for Neuvirth. So they'll just look at it as a 1-1A situation. Del Zotto, I mean, again, defensively, they kind of needed him. I think certainly after Spiza was obviously they let him go to Vegas. So I think Del Zotto can still play a role there. And Gagne, probably a little higher than probably I would have liked, but Sam did a really good job in Columbus. And again, he's going to get an opportunity to really kind of star again in this situation. So, and I think the term was fine, and the numbers and the dollars were fine. They're a team in transition, and those guys are that for them.
Here's a surprise. This just got reported a little while ago, but maybe Anthony, you saw it. I wouldn't have thought the Flyers would have even given a qualifying offer to Roman Lyubimov, and they did, and he turned it down.
He turned out, but then again, you have to look at it with Lyubimov. They put it in there so they can maintain his rights in this.
I know, but I'm still surprised they even.
He was not a guy that they knew long term that he was not going to be staying.
Yeah,
there was no roster spot. Wanted to go back to Russia, and obviously Dan Milstein mentioned it in his tweet about the fact that Olympics were very important to him.
Right.
There was no guarantee at the NHL level, but again, there was no spot here in Philadelphia. And just saw how he was used last year. He was used earlier in the season. Later in the season, pretty much dropped off. They were using Chris Vandevelde over him, and
but that's what Poyle did years ago with Radulov when he went back to the KHL. He qualified him so he'd have the right to get him back if he ever came back to the NHL. So, and one last thing, I think that don't you think Kovalchuk might be a fit in Montreal now that they're so desperate to fill that void by Radulov that maybe if Kovalchuk doesn't sign in the KHL that it could be, or that he could find a home in Montreal.
Yeah. I mean Kovalchuk. I mean that's a place I think Kovalchuk would probably like to play. But I don't know. I mean, I
don't think Bergevin gives him a 5-year deal. No way.
Oh no. He's gonna get 3. Nobody gives him more than 3.
Claude Julien with them too is the other one.
That's the other problem. Yeah.
I mean, I just got this text. I don't know if this is out or not, so it may have been reported, but someone just texted me that the Canadians made the same exact offer to Radulov.
Yes. Renaud Lavoie TVA reported that.
According to Radulov, that deal came into him after he had already accepted the Dallas offer.
Because this person said me they texted before July 1st that offer was made to him.
Yeah, this is according to Radulov. He said, I did not receive it. I did not receive that until today after I already let them know that I'm signing with Dallas.
That's curious.
Sounds like a fax. It sounds like a fax machine issue.
Yeah, and honestly, if they offered him the same dollars, it's not the same dollars because Texas is no taxes and Montreal has taxes up the wazoo.
Oh yeah, then the money in Dallas is
public relations. It's pure public relations.
Yeah, this is spin.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was. I mean, so yeah, we can. One other thought I had on the Flyers before I went further that I kind of lost my train of thought on, but anyway, we'll I'm sure we'll come back to it at some point down the line. Thanks, Anthony, so much for jumping on today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
And thanks, guys, for filling for the first half hour there. That big family. I've got like 45 family members down here, so I was trying to sneak away and get everything together, and I haven't spent any time with them for 3 days, of course, because I've been locked in this room. So.
And we have tons of people watching, and I think that's reflective of the fact that Hockey Central is away for the summer. All the hockey shows are away from the summer.
Right.
So you're for your first
on the show, and definitely, we'll be here. Like we'll be here. We won't be here tomorrow because we'll be celebrating the birthday of the United States of America tomorrow. But we will be back on Wednesday, and then for the rest of the week. And there's still a lot to happen here. There's so many.
And Nick's not going to deny that he has a suntan. He won't do it.
No, this is actually just from not showering for like 3 days. But yeah, this is the best.
Thank you for that information.
No worries. Remember that, the buzz, folks. It is just hockey. We will talk to you soon.